Welcome back, Wargamers, and we're going to continue our series on the cities of Sigmar, and we are slowly plodding along to the various sub-factions of this army. And today, we're going to cover one that was highly desired, and that is the Scourge Privateers. Got numerous comments about this in the descriptions of other videos, and I'll admit, just by their look and their aesthetic, these are some awesome models, and an army based around this theme would be incredible. I also want to point out that there is, very limited information or art for this sub-faction, but if you're interested to learn more about them, there's actually a novella that Games Workshop put out called The Heart of Winter, I believe it's called, where we follow a main character through the world of the Privateers. It's a cool book, right? It's cheap online. Go ahead and grab it. At the top of the lore dive, so to speak, I want to point out something here that makes them very interesting. We've kind of touched on this before, and that is much like the Phoenix Temple, their origins have no real relation to their time in Azir, right? Locked away during the Age of Chaos by Sigmar. That's where a lot of, these different factions that we've been introduced to in this series kind of were born, right? The culmination of all these different civilizations and how they, work together to reclaim, I should say, the mortal realms. These guys are kind of apart from that, much like the Phoenix Temple were. And that's really a big deal if you've been following this series, right? It's a critical moment in this army, the Cities of Sigmar army, its history. And so not being tied to that event or using that time in Azir to change or include other races or anything like that makes them very, very unique. And so if they aren't super linked to the time in Azir where what we know as the Cities of Sigmar was, really forged, how do they fit in to that army? Well, from a big picture view, the Scourge Privateers are elves that have chosen a life of the sea, sailing, hunting, piracy, trade, commerce, things like that. This is super different than the way that, say, the Deepkin have, who really chose the underwater life as a way to hide from and adapt to a life without their god Teclis. Instead, these are classic elves that chose a profession and a life at sea. And this is incredibly important for a few reasons, right? Reasons that are super important to the Cities of Sigmar as a whole, because realm gates are, in perspective, quite rare. We've read the books that have it seems like they're everywhere, but in reality, there's so much space and the realms are so vast, there's just not a realm gate to get you wherever you want to be around every corner. And Sigmar himself is reserving his ability to teleport troops for war with the Stormcast Eternals. So using the natural environment for growth, trade, transportation is of massive significance. Finding a way to, create a well-worn path or travel down a river or across a sea is much more reliable than, say, hopefully finding a realm gate leading to where you want to go. Now, I'm not sure about the rest of the world, right? I'm from America, but in the US, when we really developed industrial ways of navigating the Mississippi River, huge river on the East Coast, a new societal boom happened because now people and industry and resources were all much easier to get across the river. And even though it's just crossing a single river, it weirdly made the world smaller because now everything that you wanted on the East Coast can be brought further to the Midwest and in the West. Likewise, having a fleet of traders and merchants and ambassadors and, reliable transportation, and they act as a fighting force that can get places rapidly, that's a recipe for success. And that's really how they fit in. They provide services and sometimes weapons to the greater Cities of Sigmar armies. Now, all of the things that I just talked about really focus on travel, right? Helping cities develop and grow through bringing goods from one place to another. Of course, there is that. But there's another aspect of the Scourge Privateers taking place largely among the seas of the realms, and that is fishing. Because we've talked in other videos, particularly the exploration of various realms, that each of them has an abundance of different resources, but tend to lack something else. For example, and I'm kind of just making this up, Chamon has metal to build all the war machines that you'd ever want, but maybe things like food or drinking water is a little bit rarer. To keep the cities of this magnitude going, immense amounts of supplies are needed, and the Scourge Privateers are there to deliver. mega sea creatures, exotic fish of the deep, and nightmares that have never seen the sun have all been dragged from the ocean floors and used to feed the masses of the cities. This food can be traded as a rare delicacy or sent to the troops to ensure the war effort is kept in motion. Honestly, it doesn't really matter as long as somebody is paying for it. The Scourge Privateers are happy to provide. And I can't overstate how important the sea is when you want to grow a society, like the ones that we see in the Cities of Sigmar book, right? It's full of food and water and resources, but also full of danger. Not because there are the great beasts of the sea out to kill the Scourge Privateer, but since they also deal in, illicit trade and a black market, many provinces are not keen on them either. So it's a very dangerous life, both from, the creatures that you're hunting, but as well as the societies which you're providing a service to. This tension is why the bulk of the Scourge Privateers never really come ashore. Instead, they live on their colossal black arcs, is what they're called, and basically they take the hides and the shells of huge sea creatures, bind them together, and then build a city on it. It's not a ship in the traditional sense, it is a ship to say, but it's not like a sailing ship like you'd normally think of. It's a mobile island fortress, right? Too big for most ports, but a somewhat sovereign nation all its own, right? It is the port, it just can go wherever they need it to. This also factors into the natural attitude of the Scourge Privateers. They don't like Sigmar's rules. It's not that they're evil, but they are a rebellious, free spirit, chafing under authority. They want the freedom of the open ocean and to decide their own fate. They want to take on slaves and have slave labor. They have a warrior culture. Some of them want to worship the old gods, but their insolence is tolerated because of what they bring to the cities of Sigmar. Likewise, they tolerate this yoke of law and order since it brings them coin. And no one really asks a lot of questions about what goes on in a black arc. Do good for us, keep the appearance of being a good boy, go do whatever you want, I don't want to hear about it. And if you do read that novella, Heart of Winter, you'll get a sense of what it's like to be on a black arc. Spoiler alert, it's not good if you're not a Scourge Privateer. But it's a really great depiction, I won't spoil it anymore, go ahead and check it out. The last thing I wanted to note here is when they go to war. This is more of a raiding party of pirates than it is like a full standing army. The Black Ark can sail in quickly, the smaller ships anchored on it will detach, full of warriors itching for blood. They do these lightning fast raids, take anything they can, then get away before any kind of formal resistance or counterattack can occur. And if you really tick them off, they'll bring some of the very creatures of the deep against you. The mighty beast known as the Charybdis claws up the shores. It's steered by these two handlers, and it acts as this living siege weapon to allow light and fast Scourge Privateers to do the rest. So let's talk real quickly, why are the Scourge Privateers so cool? First of all, I love these guys. I won't lie. I love the nautical theme, and it's a nautical theme in a way that feels very different than the Deepkin, right? I love the dark, creepy elven vibe, dark elves for the win for sure. But this is a great one because it illustrates how these factions have to work together, right? One might look at this and say, well, how are these guys parts of order? Because they aren't good. And honestly, you'd be right. In the traditional sense of, morality, they are not good. But honestly, there are countless times when people of different values and ideologies and beliefs have to pull together to make a society work. They hate chaos, which is frankly good enough for Sigmar most of the time. They provide some incredibly important services to the cities. And maybe that's just a feeling of obligation for Sigmar letting them hide in Azir, but as long as they can profit and be left relatively alone to their own devices, who really cares? Now, truthfully, I would love to see an army of these guys, an entire Cities of Sigmar army based around, Scourge Privateers. The Charybdis is one of my favorite models that they've ever put out. It just looks so mean. And more than anything else, I've mentioned this before in numerous lore videos where crafting a lore for your faction, it gets really fun when you have a leader or a centralized leader that you can really get behind, and crafting a background for a notorious pirate leader just sounds so stinking fun, right? Because then you can have his whole band of miscreants below him, and you can kind of build a lore based on, what positions they hold on the ship, what they do for each other, that kind of thing. And you can really get wild because the Black Arcs are so large. They have stuff like gladiatorial pits. They have full, restaurants and commerce and trade and bazaars and all these things because they are literally huge cities on the ocean unto themselves. But they're not treated like a city in these Cities of Sigmar books simply because they are somewhat subservient, somewhat off to themselves. They like their privacy. They don't want to interact on the Black Arc with anyone else. That's their space. What you, as the player, get to interact with is who they hire out. The Scourge Privateers themselves. So I think it makes for a really interesting push and pull. Like, they could, if they ever decided to come out with a book that is just Scourge Privateers, and fill out the range a little bit more, that kind of stuff, it would absolutely work because then we would see inside the Black Arc and get the lore from that, and it would be a really cool thing. As it is right now, they're kind of this side piece of the Cities of Sigmar that offer a very important service and, as far as the transportation and the food and the illicit trade and all these things, that they're kind of a bolt-on, shadowy figure that keeps societies moving. I like it. I like it because I like pirates and I like these guys. I like the elves and the dark elves and that kind of stuff. So I'm all about it. But tell me this, what is your favorite unit from this line? I know it's small, but for me, it's the Charybdis hands down. But honestly, just the basic Scourge Privateer model is really cool looking. And I'd love to hear which one is your favorite. So go ahead and tell me in the comments down below, as well as if there's any more Cities of Sigmar sub-factions that you'd like covered. Go ahead and let me know that as well, because we're kind of getting through the vast bulk of them. This playlist has gone on pretty long, a lot longer than other factions, because there's so many smaller pieces to it. But let me know in the comments below and we can get that video made. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I look forward to seeing you in my next lore episode. Take it easy and happy wargaming.